All right. Hi guys. Good morning or good afternoon because it's a little past 12 right now. And welcome to the September Patreon exclusive live. I hope y'all are excited. We're going to be painting Nastrutium. And this is something that I had tried out from the cottage back in July. And here we are doing it again. But this time I'm going to walk you guys through it properly, and we'll even do a little bit of a composition similar to what I did here. So these were the two that I had done live. One was on YouTube and it didn't turn out all that great, so then I hopped onto Instagram, and this was the one I did on Instagram. And then I kind of just, I think I did one leaf. Yeah, this was the leaf, and then I let it go. And so today with patrons, you'll get a special session focusing on this while we're using our Mottler and the Blooms brush for the creation process. How have you guys been enjoying these brushes? Have you ordered them? Did you try any of the videos I put out using these brushes? I'm going to even put the Petals brush just in case. If any of you don't have these brushes, feel free to use your regular round brushes. That works just as well. So let me walk through what I am using really quickly, my supplies, and then we can get right into it. So put that aside. So for paper, I'm using my Legion Hotpress in the 9x12, 100% cotton, nice and smooth. Then for colors, I'm using my Daler-Rowney set of 48, and these are just some of the colors that I took out from the set. And then for brushes, like I mentioned, the whole point of most of these videos are to kind of really get you guys comfortable with using these brushes for our beautiful loose watercolor florals. So I've got the Bloom number 12. I've got the Mottler 1.5 inch, Princeton Neptune number 6, Princeton Velvetouch number 6, and then, like I mentioned, the number 6 petal. Actually, where's my number 10 petal? Just because this is such a large surface, I think I might need the 10 more than the 6. I've got back problems today, and so any tiny little move just really sets me off like shooting pain. Okay, here's number 10. Okay, so I think we are good to begin. Just let me know in the comments if you guys have any questions. Hi Jill, just saw Jill's comment. I'm here but not painting yet. That's fine. So whoever misses it, you can always catch the replay and paint along. And yeah, okay. So like I mentioned, we're using this for inspiration, and we're just I'm gonna walk you through the process of the Nastrutium. We're gonna start off with using the Princeton Mottler. Let me zoom in a bit for this so you can get a little bit of a close-up. And let me see, just want to make sure that the quality is good, the lighting is good, not blurry. There we go. Okay, so this is a very big brush, and I would suggest if you have problems with keeping things concise and controlling the size, maybe go with the Blooms instead. But I'll be showing you how to use either of the two brushes for this. This is great for large surfaces, obviously. And if you've got brush control down pat, then this also works here. I like to challenge myself and use these brushes because I struggle with the control. And by struggle, I mean I'm so fixated on trying to get certain shapes look a certain way that it ends up becoming bigger than I intended. And you'll see that in most of my videos, most likely. So all I'm doing is just getting the color from the brush, from the color cake here. And then I'm going to use my my palette surface that is right here. And we're dominantly going to use like this orange and like a pinky red, so we get some nice contrast happening. So I want to make sure for this first process that I've got enough color on this brush. So dipping to get water, mixing the color on here. And I think this is enough. I'll get a little bit more because I think I'll do 2 of these, and then we'll switch the color to the, oh, let me tell you what color I'm using first of all. My gosh, scatterbrain today. This is vermilion hue. So we'll start off with vermilion hue, and then I will get a little bit of rose madder hue for our third. And then we'll likely throw in some quinacridone magenta or even some of the permanent rose in there just to get some nice, beautiful jewel tones. I like my pinks, I like my oranges, I like my reds. Okay, so here we go. Got a good enough mix. And I'm going to start off using the side of this brush. The side of this brush really helps us control this way. This angle or this holding it flat gives us this full width as well. So it really depends on what you want to try. I would encourage experimentation because this is how you learn, this is how you get comfortable. But I'm going to start off with the side, and I'll start off with a flower right here. And I'm using the side to kind of get a shape in. You can see how big this has turned out. So I'm dipping the tip of my brush in water and lightly grazing to really help this shape more to my liking. Now dipping the tip of my brush in water again, just so I get a lighter version of the color, I'm going to go ahead and create another petal. Notice how my edges are, I'm going over it to get my edges to be a little bit more rounded as opposed to straight edged. Getting more color from the color cake, and I'm going to drop that in here while it is damp. And I'm starting from the out in, so this way I get some nice darks and lights going inward. Let's end off with doing a little bit here. Now you can see how large this one turned out. So for the center, I want to add, before I add the center, let's just throw in a little bit of this dark hue in there. For the center, I want to take my number 6, and I'm going to get some of this color here, the vermilion, directly from the color cake. And I'm going to use the tip and lightly do these little strokes so I get a nice jagged edge in the center. And what this is also accomplishing is it's giving me a dark center as well, so we get that dark to light. Because it's the same color, we're not quite getting that much of a contrast that's like visible, properly visible. So I'm going to get the madder rose, and I'm going to drop that in as well. These two colors together are so pretty. And notice how my strokes are coming from out in, because again, when this dries off, it's going to give us a nice, beautiful bloom. And like a soft blend. I'm going to even drop some strokes from the top down. And what this does right here is gives us an idea of the folds within the flower, and also gives us some nice definition between the petals. Trying to keep our strokes loose. We're not trying to make this super realistic, but we just want enough definition that the person that the viewer gets an idea of exactly what's happening where. Immediate pop, right? Okay. So let's try the same thing using the same colors, but this time we're going to use the bloom. I'm going to allow this to dry for a bit. So here's the bloom. And vermilion. And get some from my color cake. Now, the process that I did here, I just want to quickly break it down. If you've watched any of the videos where I did these, YouTube or on Instagram. We start off light and then we drop in the dark color, and this is what gives us some nice depth. So this is where you can see that the innermost area is dark, and that's because we went in after with that second brush and dropped in darker color. So more color, less water. And then what really gives this direction and movement is the fact that I went in after, before it dries off, and using the back of my brush, just adding in strokes. So you can absolutely do that as well, and it doesn't have to be all over the place. And by all over the place, I mean it doesn't have to be for every little petal that you have painted. You can start off with a couple, or maybe just focus on the one side of the petal, or just in the areas where it is damp, to really give some, like a hint of some definition. Oh, my battery is going to die. I'm going to switch the battery real soon, so stay with me. When I started, it said it was full, and now all of a sudden it's saying it's going to die. I'll be right back. Stay with me, guys. Just going to do this real quick. All right, here we go. We are back. Yes, we're back. Okay, so remember I mentioned we're going to do one more with the same color and just using the Blooms brush. So here it is. So this one I'll do this one at the top over here, and then we'll, in the middle, we'll probably have, or down here we'll have another color. Let's just, yeah, let's do that. So this is slightly easier because the width is smaller, obviously. So I'm going to do several little strokes to create my first petal, and then I can use the side to really add my little jaggedy edges in there. And then using the same technique, we're going to go around and create more petals. And at this point, if you want to drop in a little bit of this color for this petal here, so there's a stark difference between the two flowers, that would be a nice pretty thing to do. Notice how it's really giving us that impression of curvature and also kind of a little bit of depth happening in there. I'm going to get some of this color and drop that in here. And I'm going to get a little bit more, mix it in with that orangey hue, and we're completing the rest of the flower here. And again, keep your strokes loose. The width or the length of your petals do not need to be consistent throughout. If you really notice, like I've got like a small petal here, and it almost looks like it's kind of folding over. So feel free to be loose with your shapes to really get those nice effects. Okay, let me go in with my number 6. Or you can even use that brush, but I'm going to use my number 6 because it's easier for you guys to get a little bit of experience with the when to drop in color, and then once you're comfortable with this part, you can feel free to use your blooms to continue adding colors within your petal and flower. So I'm dropping these colors in before it dries. And I'm going to do a whole bunch of that color on this side here, just so this area really stands out some more. And then, like I mentioned, for the center. to get my nice jaggedy edges happening. And watercolor always dries off lighter, so if you're really looking for some stark differences in your petals and such, just make sure you're dropping in enough layering of that second color so you can see it once it's dried up. You always push all the color down to the bottom. All right, so this time we're going to allow this bit to dry. We're going to go in with a little bit of that third color. So I'm going to use quinacridone magenta and the Madder Lake. Let's see how this blends in together. So let's start off with the quinacridone. This might be too mauve-ish, and if that is the case, then I'll go with the permanent rose, but I'll let you guys know. So this third one I'm going to do with the number 6. Let's use all the brushes, find out which is your comfort zone and go with that, and then which is your area that you need to get a little bit more practice in, and this will be helpful. Okay, so let's do this here. Okay, so this is like really pink. So I'm kind of swishing my brush around to get that nice shape at the top, and really pulling down all the color to the bottom. And then we're doing the same thing on this side. And because these are so close, this one's so close to these flowers here, I'm going to deliberately make sure that I'm hugging this area without overlapping, just to give it some nice subtle definition there. Getting more color, we're going to drop this part in right here. And then I'm even going to drop in some of the Madder Lake to kind of give this area more of a shadowy look because it's touching this flower here. Peeping out, right? So let's get some of this. I'm going to drop this in, drop one stroke there, and then really push this down here. Same idea that we sort of did for these two. We're using the number 6 to do the same thing here. Bright and beautiful. Okay, so let's move on to doing another one similar, but this time I want to make it lighter. So I'm just gonna, like a background sort of light nasturtium. So I'm just gonna do this. See how watered down my mixture is right now, and I'm going to deliberately touch this area so that this color infuses into this part or portion. And I'm keeping my strokes light and loose and almost like it's fading off in the back. Still touching some of these petals so it kind of blooms in, leaving a lot of white space so that it doesn't look too crowded and jammed up in there. Okay, so we've got that one in. This has dried up just a tad. What we need to do is add a little bit of a darker center. So I'm using the Madder Rose. I'm kind of intermixing all these colors, some for the center, some to highlight petals, things like that, so that it ties up in the end. And when you allow things to dry a little bit, sometimes timing is everything when you're adding to get that shading. We can always go in and add the shading bit after it's dried up, but if you're looking for that soft bloom where it looks like it was painted that way, you want to get it before it dries up. So we've got that happening there. Let's do a little bit of this color down here. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, and then this will be like the 5th one. So same idea, I'm going to use it with, paint this in using the number 6. And if you've taken the loose or you've watched any of my other videos, I always talk about holding your brush midway so you can get looser strokes. And so that's what we're doing here. And in this one, I'm going to kind of try and see if I can put in all the colors that we've used so far, just to get a nice tie-in. And then orange for this area here. This orange is very, very dark, so I'm washing off my brush and really drawing from the color here, but I love that bloom it's giving me into this pink bit. All right, so now that we've gone full circle, let's add some dark tones to the center. So just grazing with the tip of my brush. If you've got pooling happening in the center, your color is not going to bloom as well, so keep that in mind. So maybe either take your paper towel and dab, or wait for it to dry just a bit more before you go in with the second color. I'm trying not to get rid of the beautiful blooms that I have in between these 3 colors, but some areas I do want to add a little bit of a highlight or like a defining stroke. So this is what it looks like so far. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4. I'll do another faded one happening here. Let's tie that in. This area is still damp, so we'll pull it from here, this color. And these areas can be light because you want to have the eye gradually float or move from your main focus to like outskirts where it's the fluffing, what I like to call the fluffing. So at this point, if you even want to do a little bit of a splatter to kind of help the looseness in these areas, the splatter always helps. Usually when I'm doing a lesson, I find what happens is I get so fixated on showing you guys how to get loose that my stuff ends up looking a lot more defined than loose. Because again, watercolor, you got to roll with the punches. You got to make sure you get to things before stuff dries up. So let me get a little bit of detail happening within the petals by using the back of my brush and drawing in the lines. So we'll start off with this one here because this was done earlier. And again, feel free, this is like an optional step. If you don't want to use this to get texture, you don't have to. But it really does help give some detail to your loose flowers. So you can see, I don't know if you can see as clearly, but it's giving the petals a little bit of direction. So I'll do some over here on this one. Most of this flower has dried up already, but we still have some bits here that are damp, and so I'm taking advantage of that and just sort of going in that area and adding some stuff. Get some happening here. And I think what's going to happen with these two is I'm going to add a little bit more detail for their center so they pop out more than the rest. Because as you can see, they're drying up, but I'm not getting the same definition that I did. Not definition, but I'm not getting the same depth that I got over here. So in that case, what you can just do is go in with a slightly darker hue and then spread it out with the second brush with just water on it, and then it'll bloom nicely. And this is the part where watercolor paper, or the kind of paper you're using, becomes important, because if your paper doesn't get like isn't able to hold or manage another damp session after it's dried up, then you'll get a little bit of pillage and stuff like that. So keep that in mind as well if you're getting results slightly different. Okay, so let's move on to doing some of the centers here that I just mentioned. So I'm going to use the rose madder hue. Feel free to also use some umber mixed in with it, and this will give it a slightly darker tone. Gets a little bit tricky because of the percentages of umber versus the color. So if you want to just use this and do some wet on dry with me, that also works. So using the number 6, or you can use your number 4. I'm gonna lightly graze along here. An uneven length is helpful. If you make it even, it's just going to look a bit too symmetrical. And when you're doing a loose style, you want to make sure that things are not symmetrical. It's all about letting loose and getting pretty results because of the loose factor. Somewhere in between realistic and abstract almost. I'm gonna get some of this, no. I'm gonna get some of, yeah, I think I should stick with this color because the pink might not work as well with this. Get some strokes in here. And you're grazing. You're not pressing down too much, but you're grazing to get these strokes in. And I'm really, really going for it now to make sure the center is nice and dark. And then same thing here. I mixed it in with a little bit of umber. And then using that same color, I'm just going to get a little bit of that happening in some of the outskirts flowers. No need for anything there. So this one, again, notice very loose and more water, less color. And I'm just going to leave it that way. And so this is what it looks like right now without any leaves. So now we can go ahead and let's do some of the leaves with it. So the leaves are pretty much like very circular. So we can, so first of all, for color, let's use sap green or olive green. Actually, I'm going to use olive green because I really like their olive green. And how are you guys feeling about which brush do you think we should use for the leaves? I'm thinking I'll just keep it easy because I don't want it to get too big in comparison to the flowers. So I'm going to use the number 6. This way I have more control. Had I been using a larger sheet of paper, I would probably just continue using the blooms. But yeah, let's use the olive green. And for placement of leaves, sorry, I started out asking a question and ended up answering it for myself. So for leaves, let's do one. I like to do some in like at least 3 different areas to kind of break things up. So I'll do one peeping up from the bottom here. We'll do a main one on this side and maybe one kind of around here somewhere. So we've got 1, 2, 3. So like 3 different areas. So let's start off with this area here first. And so just round circle really is what their leaves are like. And just pretty much painting this whole area in. And I'm going to wrap around this petal. Now if you wanted to dampen this area with water first and then drop in the green to give it that bloom, and it would make it look even looser just because the placement or the dispersion of the green would be sort of uneven just depending on how the water makes the color flow. You can try that. So you see how I've got it hugging here. So what I'm going to do is get some of a darker green. So you can either mix the olive green with a darker color or simply just get a darker green. I'm going to use some of the Hooker's green. And I'm going to add lines sort of coming this way, inward. And I'm pushing all the color in this area here so that it gives it that impression of dark to light. And we're getting shades of green within this. Almost like a gradient effect within our leaf. But I want the darkest for shadow effects right here. So that's what I'm doing right now, just sort of dabbing extra color. To really hug that flower. Okay, and then if you look at the way I've done the leaves, like it kind of has like a curvature at the bottom, but the veins come right to the center. So that's what we want to do. So I'm going to have the center come towards where the flower is. So I'm just pulling down, not in straight lines, guys. It's got to be like almost like a curve. So this way you're giving the impression of that nice rounded shape, curve, yeah, flow. And I'm kind of allowing it to sort of fade off into the dark green that we have there. So we let that dry and let's get a little bit more of this happening in the other areas we discussed. So this time I'm going to do the whole painting the shape of the leaf in first and then dropping in the green so we can see what that looks like. And I think it's ideal for this area because it'll be, actually let's do it right here around this corner here. So shape of the green, shape of the leaf, my green is ready. So I'm just adding water in this area first. Can't see my shape, but it's literally like that. And it doesn't have to be a perfect round. It can have a little bit of curvature like our petals here. And now that this is damp, I'm going to get some of the green and I'm going to drop it first within the edge of the flower so it gives me that nice edge. Watch it bloom. And this is perfect for this edge area because then it doesn't look as concentrated as this one here, the first one we painted. And I'm dropping more color along the edge so that it's darker. Now I'm giving a little bit of definition to the edge here, but I'm not I'm allowing the color and the water to do its thing and I'm not directing it too much. Maybe just try and do that. Okay, perfect. Now, I want to drop a little bit of a darker green before we do the lines. So I'm going to get some of my, let's use some of the sap green. And I think the sap green is very similar to this olive green. Or if you want to mix some of the olive green in with the umber, that also helps. Like I mentioned, you can get a slightly darker version of green. Let's drop in some of this. Although I'm not a huge fan of how the Hooker's green looks, but for the sake of tying it in, because I already used it once, I'm just going to drop in some colors, some of it over here. Perfect. And then I'll just do a little bit of a splatter. You know why? Because the edges are always, you want the edges to be loose looking, right? And then before things dry off, let's do our lines. So starting from, this is going to be my center, and I'm just dragging outward. You can even drag from outside in. See what you like best and go with that. And then one little thing that I would suggest doing is, you see the splatters that have happened here. If you wanted to give it that nice soft feel like there's other foliage happening, just take a brush and just lightly sort of dab and spread the color out. In fact, if you want to get a two-tone happening, get some of your olive green, and with that kind of just spread things out a bit. Let it bleed into some of these areas here, even with the leaf happening. It's the colors that really make for this style of painting. The colors that kind of unify everything, that make it loose and fun. Okay, so that's pretty much the idea for the leaves. I know it's extremely light over here, but I'm fine with that. Let's get, so we've got 1, 2. Let's get one more happening here at the top, maybe. 1, 2, 3. I want to stay in that corner. So let's do it here. And this leaf can be a little bit, I was going to say extended and separate from the flowers, but we don't have too much room, so I'm going to have to make this one also kind of appearing like it's peeping from the back of this main flower. If you have the room, sure. If not, just roll with it. They can all be like they're at the back of the flower, and you just give them a darker background. So that's what really adds depth, when you add that dark color to your leaves or certain petals that you want to make appear like it's coming from behind. Gonna get some of the sap green, and I'm mixing it in with a little bit of umber, and here I'm dropping that in here at the edge while it is damp. But you want to make sure you're dropping more color and less, like more color versus water, especially if this area is nice and damp. Because I can tell you what's going to happen here. Because I had so much water, it's going to stop right there, and it's going to dry off, giving me that little bit of a dried edge over here, unless I do this and really blend it in, and using my brush kind of just helping it along. So keep these things in mind. All of this takes a little bit of awareness. So I'm mentioning these things to you guys as I go along, and I'm hoping that if you've noticed this happen in your work, you figure out why it's happening, and then you catch it before. You get a little bit of that sap green as well. Just drop some of that in here, just getting hints of these colors in here to tie everything in. Oh, this one a little bit outside. And then using the back of my brush, we're going to do the lines. There we go. So we've got three, they kind of look like fans almost coming out of the flowers, which is cute. We'll do, yeah, I think 3 is enough. Let's move on to doing our little fluffy flowers, and then we'll do a little bit of touch up with our green petals brush. Greens with our petals brush, that's what I meant to say. So for our flowers on the outskirts, I don't know, guys, what color do you want to use? You've got a lot of bright pinks and oranges and almost like a hint of red happening. I feel like if we throw in yellow, it'll be too much of a pop. Let's get a little bit of the purple. And by purple, I mean cobalt violet. So we're doing, so let's mimic the same style that we use to paint our nasturtiums, and just make it a lot smaller. So actually, instead of using my number 6, I will use my number 4. And so I'm getting color directly from here. And let's start off with doing some flowers over here. So using the same color, leftover color, I'm just going around and painting shapes, organic shapes. Trying to mimic the same style of flowers that we just did. The same technique that we did for the nasturtiums, that's what I mean. And then before this dries up, I've got pooling here, so I'm not going to drop in the color there. But this is the perfect spot to drop in some color. So I'm getting more color, more of the purple, and I'm just dropping it in there and watch the bloom that it gives me. At this point, if you even want to add a little bit of the pink, just to have some highlights happening, get some of the pink and drop it in. Then getting some water, I'm just going to drop in more dabs so it sort of blends in with the colors down here. And again, we want like this to act almost like fluffing, but enveloping all the colors that we have plus the new color that we added. You can even do a darker tone for the center if you really want that pop. So I've got permanent mauve here. I think it's dark. Not quite sure. Let me see. Yeah, it's dark enough. So I get some color directly from it and just drop it in. And do you see what I mean? It just gives it an additional pop. So we'll do the same technique we did here. Up a little bit over here. Yeah, let's do some here. Trying to make sure the shape of it is to my liking and that I can use it for other things. So here we go, getting some of that purple. Dropping that in here. I'm going to drop some purple next to this green on purpose because it's damp. I'm using leftover purple. Really going to go ahead and create that, leaving white space in between. Create that round shape of a loose flower. I'm getting some purple directly from there for a slightly darker rendition. And I want to create some just kind of on the cusp of the leaf here. Some on the edge here as well. And then our pinks. Just getting some pink. Dropping that in right there. Trying to make it tie in together with the rest of the color scheme we have going on. Okay, and then getting some of the darker purple and just dropping that in before these areas dry off. Beautiful. And then if you want to add a little bit of, what's the word I'm looking for? A little bit of splatter, that also helps. I'm adding a little bit of darker drops instead of the splatter here, so I'm a little bit more in control of where these fall or where they're placed. So if you want to control where they're placed, do what I'm doing right now. If you're fine with the splatter and you want to just have that satisfaction of doing it, go ahead and do that. Here we go. So I love how they're kind of like delicately highlighting these areas here. So we're gonna continue on and do a little bit right at the top, same technique, and then we'll move on to doing our greens to tie things in together. And we should be almost done after we do our drop yellow for the center here. Okay, so getting our mauve, cobalt mauve, right? Cobalt violet. It's too dark, so I'm watering it down, going all the way around, leaving some white space in the center, pushing the color around, dipping the tip of my brush in water to get like a watered down version of this mauve. I'm going to continue creating these organic type shapes. I'm just dropping bits of color here and there. So now we get some of the pink. Drop that in. It's a bit too dark. Washing that off. There we go. The idea is to create a little bit of breakage. That's what I like to call it. A break between your shapes to give the eye a little bit of direction as to what is where. That's good enough. We're going to get the darker tone for the center and we should be done this bit. So how do you decipher where the centers are? You literally lay down your shapes for your flowers, and then if you feel like certain areas could be great to kind of suddenly emphasize that those are flowers, drop it in there. Okay, so we've got 3 areas for this, 3 areas for our leaves. Now we can take our petals brush and create more. And one more thing that I would absolutely suggest that you guys do, if you look at this composition here, because of the gap in between the flowers, I decided to go ahead and just create the stems, the nice little wiry, curvy stems that they have. Feel free for this, like if your flowers are this close here, if you want to drop in a dark green, darker than this, and just paint this area in between, that would tie things up real nicely as well. So just a comment for you to take note of later. Okay, so taking our petals brush, I'll use the sap green to create little tendril-like elements similar to what I have here. And we're gonna paint. So just kind of giving my little flowers here some attachments. You want to kind of extend and paint in some tendril-like elements. This is your brush for that. It is fabulous. Like any which way you kind of hold the brush and lay down your stems, you get some interesting shapes just because of how the shape of this brush is. You get some nice thin lines with it. And if you've not watched the video of how to use this brush, I have a couple of videos on Patreon, so check that out. And try it out before you try this if you're not accustomed to this brush. And just like with anything else that I paint, I always say add a little bit of a second green or a different green for visual interest. So make sure you're doing that as well. Just dropping in darker colors within this area. Okay, so we've got it nice and fluffy there. Let's do some over here. And I'm doing the same thing. I want to attach them first. You know, it's almost like a game of Tetris or something for me. I must attach them, even though I say it's optional. And then go ahead and do your added leaves and such here and there. I want to add some tendril-like elements that are kind of just going outward. In fact, I'm going to just zoom in a bit for this. So I've even done that to kind of really bring it down. You get some beautiful shapes with this that you can get like the loosest looking leaves and tendrils, and that's why I kind of really love this brush for what it is. I'm filling up the gaps here to kind of really make that area stand out. So same idea that we've done here. We're going to get a little bit of that happening at the top. So turning it sideways so you can see better. And I can get to it better too. So you want to try and get as much little interesting details like leafy elements as possible. Kind of really fluff this up because we've got these big blooms happening. So to get a little bit of these tiny little leaves and such here, which is helpful. So let me zoom out. There we go. So this is what it's looking like so far. I'm going to switch over to my regular round just to get some more coverage. And so this time what I'm going to do is mix some of the transparent turquoise, and let's mix it in with some of the sap green here. Actually not transparent turquoise. Now this is looking like an emerald. That's not what I want. So ultramarine violet with the green. Let's do that. So ultramarine violet. Actually not even ultramarine violet because this is a light color. We need like a Prussian blue. Okay, Prussian blue. Third time's a charm. Mix that in. Get some of the olive green, and here's like this dark green. Now again, I'm not a huge fan of that bright green, so I'm gonna do what I always do, get some of my umber and mix it in. And the umber is right here, I believe. Actually this is black ivory. We took a little bit of the black ivory. Nope, black ivory didn't quite do it for me. So where my umber at? Sepia. Let's do sepia instead. Okay, perfect. So this is like that nice dark brownish sort of green. And I'm going to go in between these flowers here and paint that in. So take your time for this process. Enjoy it. Figure out where, maybe even stand up, have a look at your overall painting to see where you want to add these elements. I'm going to add some in between here as well, so that it ties in with the rest. And then it doesn't look like that's the only area that has like the darkest green. So a little bit of pop, right? Let's do some over here too. Outlining some of these flowers. In between these flowers, some just kind of on the cusp. Feel free to use your number 4 brush if you feel like you don't have enough brush control when it comes to using the tip of this brush. I'm going to get a little bit happening here. Perfect. Let's do some at the top here. So I don't want to cover off, like paint the whole area in, but I'm just dropping hints in here. And in between these flowers a little bit. Because if the thing is, if you go ahead and paint everything that color without leaving any white space, you lose that whole loose style of painting, and it looks like it's a very concentrated effort that you've made to fill every nook and cranny up. So that is why try and be sporadic. And again, if you end up looking at it and going, oh, it looks too intentional, that's fine, because try it again, and this is how you learn. You learn from your mistakes, you learn from happy accidents, and just embrace that process. So in this part, if you wanted to drop in water first and then go in with the color, that's also helpful, because then you can get a nice control over where you want this color to be. So because I've mixed more water in here, now you're looking at this and going, it's looking lighter than some of the other colors, and it'll dry off lighter too. So I'm going to go ahead and add more drops of color in this area while it is damp, because then it's going to give me that nice bloom. So getting more, oops, wrong color. Here we go, drop it in. I just had my sepia here. Where is it? There we go. We're going a little bit over an hour. Hope you guys don't mind. But when you're, this is the last bit of trying to get things the way you want to. We did also end up doing a fairly larger composition than I intended. But that was just me going with the flow. So you can see how it immediately pops, right? So for this area over here, I'm going to immediately, not immediately, take your time. I'm going to completely submerge the white or replace the white with the green, rather. This is the part that is exciting for me, the part where it's a key last step to completing your composition, and this can either make or break your composition. So that's where it gets exciting. So you can see how pops, right? Getting more of the blue to really make this area dark. There we go. Okay. It's also nice to get a little bit of that darker hue popping in from the side. Just very menial. You can have it overlapping some of the leaves that you have as well. Overlapping, so it looks, we're looking at wet on dry. And you can see how that kind of really ties in with this area. Now, if you even wanted to have some elements coming out from here, that also makes sense, because yeah, there's leaves in between, and if you just want to add those shapes overlapping on the flower, that works. It doesn't have to be everywhere, it could be like just some areas. I'm going to get some happening in this flower here. And what I'm going to do here is leave a little bit of white space so it doesn't look like it is painted in wholly on purpose, leaving a bit of white space. Okay, so we're almost done. I want to extend some of these factors here using my petals, just to sort of give it some nice tendril-like elements. So I'm going to get some of that color, mainly most of the sap green, even though I know it'll be light. But if we do a little bit of, I'm trying to think which direction, like this. To get some nice, interesting shapes. And then a little bit of that even over here. Okay, so while this is drying off, let's get some yellow in our centers, and I think we should be good. So for the yellow, I'm going to use my yellow ochre. So using the number 6 and getting some yellow ochre, I'm just going to drop dots, leaving white space sporadically, and also dropping the dots sporadically within the flowers. You want to add some of the sepia or umber in there just a little bit, not too much, just to give it that darker shadowy effect. You can get some directly from the color cake. Just want to make sure it's not too dark, so just rubbing it on paper towel or even your palette, just to be sure, because if it gets too dark, then it's going to really stand out and be prominent. We don't want that. And I'm only adding these at the bottom to show the shadow is more at the bottom. Not at the top. You might not even need to really, because most of the nasturtiums are like so deep down in that you can't quite see that much yellow. Yeah, and this is it. So we could even add some additional darker tones in some of these areas as well, and later on I might even add it, but for now I hope you guys enjoyed this. Let me know in the comments if you had any questions at all, and happy Sunday, guys. I'm looking forward to seeing how you guys make out with this. Let me know, out of the 3 brushes that we used to create these florals, which one you found the best and that worked for you really well, and how have you guys been doing with these brushes over the last few videos that I've done. Let me know. I'm so keen to know what you think about them, because they are truly some of my favorite brushes to use for loose florals, that is. All right, guys, thanks so much for watching, and we'll chat soon. Bye.